When someone makes some mistakes in our eyes, we tend to forgive them, keeping our hearts open even if they did some mistake. The only problem is that if the mistake is killing someone, then forgiveness cannot be offered, and instead, we tend to punish them due to the anger we feel. And now suppose that the killer was the one who killed your daughter. I'm sure you'll do everything in your power to punish that man to the fullest extent possible. Well, that's exactly what these fathers did when they found out that their daughter had been murdered by a killer. Make sure to watch this video till the end to know the whole story. As soon as the judge pronounced the death sentence against the defendant in court, the father of one of the 3 victims of the Ohio serial killer, Michael Madison, leapt over the table and began to attack him. The father of the victim, Sherelle Terry, is Van Terry. Before the incident in the courtroom, Terry had stepped up to the podium just a few moments prior to address the judge and speak about the impact of losing his daughter on him. Terry said, "Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown who has touched our families, taken my child." A moment later, Terry paused and turned to look behind him at Madison, who was sitting behind the defense table as he ran towards the convicted murderer and lunged over the table to beat him. However, deputies from the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office wrestled Terry in the courtroom as Madison and others scrambled to get out of the way. Momentarily, the courtroom erupted into chaos as a member of the gallery repeatedly yelled, "No!" while another in the gallery shouted, "Terry!" Later, Terry was dragged from the courtroom by officers of law enforcement, and it appeared that Madison was not injured in the incident. Judge Nancy McDonald of the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court refused to order the courtroom to be cleared, and the sentencing hearing proceeded after about a 15-minute delay. The outburst occurred just a few minutes after McDonald sentenced Madison to death for the murders that occurred in 2013. There were 3 bodies found in July 2013 inside an East Cleveland apartment building near Madison's apartment that belonged to Angela Deeskins, 38, Shatisha Sheely, 28, and Sherelle Terry, 18. Their bodies had been buried nearby. Madison told police that he strangled 2 of the women, but could not recall killing the 3rd one. In a decision made by McDonald, a jury recommended that Michael Madison receives the death penalty for his crimes. If she had wanted, she could have sentenced Madison to life in prison without the possibility of parole instead. However, there's no doubt in McDonald's mind that the horrific nature of Madison's crimes far outweighs any evidence presented in order to spare him, such as an abusive and chaotic adolescence. Earlier that month, Madison was convicted by the same jury of multiple counts of aggravated murder and kidnapping, as well as several other charges. And because of the lengthy appeal process, there were a good chance that any execution will be years away. And it's also important to note that Ohio does not currently have the necessary supply of lethal drugs. So it's uncertain whether the state will even be able to begin a new round of executions, which was scheduled to begin in January 2019. When the bodies were discovered in Cleveland, Ohio back in 2013, the discovery drew the attention of the whole country to the possibility that another serial killer could have been killing women around Cleveland and the surrounding area, like Anthony Sowell. In 2011, Sowell was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of 11 women, whose bodies were discovered in his Cleveland home after he was convicted of the murders. It's currently up to the Ohio Supreme Court to decide whether to uphold his conviction and sentence. However, at Madison's trial, his attorneys did not contest the fact that he had committed the crime. Their focus was instead put on saving Madison's life by providing evidence that he had suffered permanent psychological damage as a young boy as a result of physical abuse he had suffered when he was a child. In fact, a number of witnesses testified that Madison was abused by his drug-addicted mother, his stepfather, some of his mother's boyfriends, and some family members of his mother. And according to defense attorney David Grant, this history of abuse and his dysfunctional upbringing doesn't excuse what happened here, but does provide a basis for understanding the type of person Michael Madison has become over the years. This case began with a cable television worker reporting a putrid smell emanating from a garage shared by Madison and another resident of the apartment building where Madison lived. Upon entering the home, the police discovered the decaying body of a woman wrapped in garbage bags and bound up with a tape seal. A search was carried out the next day, and the bodies were found in the basement of a vacant house, as well as in the backyard of a nearby residence. Aside from arguing that Madison deserved to die both at trial and during the mitigation hearing, the prosecution argued that Madison was justified in dying because of the circumstances surrounding Madison's murder. In his opening remarks to the judge, Christopher Schroeder, an assistant prosecutor for the Cuyahoga County, said that a death sentence will send a message to the community that the strongest possible sentence will be imposed for crimes of this nature. Honestly, people like him don't deserve to live. Anyway, Coming to the next case. In a courtroom in the United States of America, a brawl broke out after a father shook his fists at a man who was convicted of killing his daughter, who was just 3 years old. As the sentencing of Jasmine Gordon and her boyfriend, Clifford Thomas, both of whom have been convicted in relation to the death of Jamila Smith, was taking place, cameras were capturing the violent scenes. It was Jamila's father, Dwayne Smith, who was scheduled to give the victim impact statement in court, but instead, he attacked Thomas, punching him in the head while he was on the stand. As they tried to continue their fight, officers from the Wayne County Sheriff's Office intervened. The courtroom was filled with yelling as they tried to separate those two. Ultimately, the court cleared Mr. Smith and he was not allowed to return to court, but he also avoided charges of his own. As Gordon's attorney, John McWilliams, put it afterward, "I'm glad no one was seriously injured. That was a pretty scary experience." In September last year, Jamila Smith passed away after her mother took her to the hospital in an emergency situation. Later, it was discovered that she had bruises consistent with abuse she had received to her head and chest, and her death was ruled as a homicide by the police. The court sentenced Gordon to 17 to 15 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter and 14 to 25 years in prison for first-degree child abuse as an aider and abettor. These sentences will serve concurrently. It was said that Thomas was sentenced to 4.5 years to 15 years in jail for involuntary manslaughter and to 1 to 2 years for resisting and obstructing a police officer. So that concludes our video. What are your thoughts on it? Please share with us in the comments below. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one. Until then, peace.